Hey everyone, this is going to be a detailed walkthrough for the Forgotten Machine on Vulnlab. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'll walk you through the machine, but I do want to be clear, this is not my live attempt at the machine. I went through this machine live while I was streaming, so if you want to check out my live attempt, you can go back through my live streams and watch the streams on January 6th and January 8th. But in this video, I'll give you a shorter walkthrough, but I'm going to do my best to teach through everything. I'll show you how I take notes, I'll explain my methodology, I'll explain the attack path. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, if you're new to working on CTF type machines, one of the first things you want to do is add the IP to your Etsy host file on Linux. If you don't know what an Etsy host file, it's how your Linux machine resolves IP addresses to domain names. So if you think for a moment about like your phone, the contacts on your phone, if I'm going to call my friend, we'll just say Austin. Well, I don't need to know his phone number. I just type in his name into my phone and my phone's contact resolves his name to his phone number. Well, that's kind of what Etsy host does, but with IP addresses, just so we don't have to remember the IP every time we do this. So let's go ahead and do sudo, if I can type, sudo nano Etsy host, and we'll open up our Etsy host file. And down here, any opening, let's go ahead and grab the IP. I'm going to grab it over here from Discord, and we will call this forgotten.vl for Vulnlab. We'll go ahead and save that, make sure we can ping it, and we are able to ping it. Now, the first step is doing some enumeration. We want to see what ports are open on our target machine. You can do this using Nmap, you can do it using a few different tools. I like using rustscan just because it's fast and the syntax is easy to remember. So let's go ahead and fire up rustscan. We'll do that with rustscan, -a, and then we just need to pass it our IP. So we're going to do forgotten.sl, and then let's pass it over to Nmap. Oh, not SL, VL. There we go. Now let me explain what this command is doing. The first part of this command is saying, hey, rustscan, I want you to scan this host right here, and I want you to find every port that is open. Out of all the different ports, find every open port. And then what we're telling rustscan to do is saying, hey, every open port that you find, we want to pass that over to Nmap and then run the -A flag with Nmap on each open port. If you know your Nmap flags, -A means I want you to run all enumeration scripts at it, and let's see what services and version information might be running on these ports. You can see it's pretty quick. Our scan is already done, and we have port 22, which is going to be SSH, and port 80, which is going to be a web server. Let's go ahead and get our notes set up, and then we will begin our enumeration. Now, I like to use Notion for notes, but honestly, it's less important what note-taking tool you use, and just more important that you're in a habit of taking notes. You can use OneNote, Obsidian, Cherry Tree, you name it. I enjoy Notion, but let's go ahead and make a header, and we'll call it H1 for enumeration, and we'll make an H2 in here, and we'll call it our Nmap scan. I'm going to drop that in. If you look over the side, it makes a cool table of contents, and also in Notion we can do a table of contents at the top, so then when we're done with the machine we can very quickly look through everything that we did. But let's go ahead and grab our full Nmap scan, at least the main things that are going to be helpful to us right here. We'll copy that and we will drop it into here and separate it out so it's easier to read. Now let's go ahead and begin our enumeration. Let's begin with port 22 SSH. There's not a whole lot we can do until we have creds or an SSH key, but we can at least check if password authentication is enabled on the machine. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll make another H2, we'll call it SSH, and I like to always put the port in there like so. And let's see if password auth is enabled. We can clear this and we can just try something like SSH root at forgotten.vl for Vulnlab. And maybe. There we go. I spelled forgotten wrong, so maybe I should learn how to spell forgotten/v or .vl for Vulnlab. And I get this error just because I already did this machine. If you ever get this error, it just means, hey, you're doing a CTF and the IP changed. You can copy this, do that, and that will fix the error. Let's go ahead and try to SSH again. We'll say yes. And then you can see we are prompted for a password. Now, I always check this because even when you do a legit pen test, especially in an external network pen test, and you see that SSH is internet exposed, well, you want to see if password auth is enabled. And if it is, that's something you would actually add to a pen test report. It's not a high finding, but it's at least an informational or a low, because best practices is not to have password auth enabled, because that allows attackers to reuse passwords, password brute forcing, all of those kinds of things. So let's just add that. We'll say password auth is enabled. And that'll be a clue to us. If we find any passwords, we'll want to retry them in SSH and see if we can gain access. But let's go ahead and dig into the web server. So we'll make another H2 right here. HTTP 80, and there's a few things I always like to check on a web server before I even look at the web server. First, I like to do a directory brute force attack, which means we're going to try a bunch of different directories and see if there's anything hidden that shouldn't be exposed on the web server. So let's go ahead and make an H3 here, and we'll call it dir search. That's the tool I like to use. You can use whatever tool works best for you. And then I also like to scan for vhost or virtual host. So let me go ahead and make a H3 for that, and we'll call it vhost, and we'll drop that in there. And then finally, we'll just make another vhost, or another H3, and we'll just call this website features. And as we look at the website itself, we can document our notes right there. Before we look at the website, let's kick off a few of our scans, beginning with dir search. We'll open up our terminal. I like to keep my terminals named the right name, so I'm going to do that. I'm also going to jump out here. We're going to make a directory, and I'll just call this forgotten walkthrough, cd over to that. And let's run dir search -u http forgotten.vl for Vulnlab, and that's all we need to do. We'll let that run. While that runs, we'll also check for vhosts. Now, you can just use ffuff for this, but I always forget the syntax, so I made a little wrapper that goes around ffuff. If you want this, you can get this out of my GitHub at Tenebrae93. So check out my GitHub, you can find it there, but we can go like tools, vhost fuzzer, and you can see how it works. It accepts a domain, a word list, a URL, and the FS filter. So let's just get this scan running. Our domain is going to be forgotten.vl, and we're going to do user share word list dirbuster directory list 2.3 medium.txt. Our URL is going to be forgotten.vl, and for FS filter we can just do 1, and FS filter means filter by size. In other words, if the vhost doesn't exist, what is the size of the page? And you can see right here we actually have different sizes, so we can do a range of sizes. Let's go ahead and do a range of, we'll say 250 to 300. I think that should catch most of them. We'll open up a new terminal just so we have it open. And now we look at dir search. It found survey, so that's good to know. vhost is running the scan. Let's go ahead and just see what this website looks like. We'll go to http forgotten.vl for Vulnlab. And right away it says you do not have permission to access this resource. So we can go ahead and grab a screenshot for our notes. I like to use Flameshot for taking notes. We'll grab that. We'll grab this. Whoops. If it will actually grab it for me, and we'll just go that and drop it in our notes underneath website features. So right away we get forbidden. I wish Notion would automatically align to the left, but it doesn't like doing that. But if we go back, and these are all false positives as far as vhost looks like from what I can see. But on dir search, we have a directory on surveys. Let's go ahead and grab these results right here, and we'll drop that in our notes so we stay organized up here in dir search. And let's go ahead and check out the survey endpoint. We can just do like survey endpoint. And let's see what is on that survey endpoint. And we have a LimeSurvey installer. Your preferred language will be used throughout the installation process. Anytime we see an application, it might be helpful for us to read about. So before we dive into it, you can Google like what is LimeSurvey. You can look for exploits, which we're going to end up using. You can see remote code execution right there. But we are doing a setup, so we can do LimeSurvey, and let's just look at the documentation. How is LimeSurvey configured? How is it set up? And we can take the time to glance through this, which I do recommend. For the purpose of this walkthrough video, LimeSurvey is just a platform to do surveys, but you can also upload plugins and things along those lines. But here's what we discovered. We found an instance of LimeSurvey that isn't set up. So because it's not set up, maybe we can set up our own instance on their web server and see what we're able to do from there. And I was reading through the Vulnlab thread, like once you complete a machine on Vulnlab, you get access to a master's channel for the machine. And looking through that thread, I think it was XCT or it was another user who said they actually saw this doing a real pen test. They were doing, I think, an internal, and they found a web server that had something like this. It wasn't LimeSurvey, it was something else, but a web application that was not set up, and they were able to set up the web application and then get RCE on. So what I really enjoy about the machines on Vulnlab is they are not CTF-y, it's not a puzzle, they're very real world. Some of the things you may encounter in the real world if you are a pen tester. So let's go through the installation process. We'll click Start Installation, and we'll go ahead and agree to the license, because why not? No one reads it anyways. And here are some pieces of information that's helpful to us. First, we have the LimeSurvey version, and we also have some information about the backend web server. We see the PHP version, the minimum memory, the MySQL database, And we have that upload directory is found in writable, application is found in writable, temp is found in writable. So some good things that will be good for us to know. Let's go ahead and grab a screenshot of this as well for our notes, and we'll highlight a few of those things. So first, let's go ahead and grab this. We have the LimeSurvey version, and we have the PHP version. Those are probably the most helpful things for us. Let's grab that, drop back over to our notes, and drop a screenshot there. As we do the install process, our screenshot definitely doesn't need to be that big, but there we go. Let's jump back over to this and see what we all need to do to install it. We will click next. And then on here, we need to set up a database. Now, when I did this live on stream, you can see me doing this. Immediately, I recognize, maybe we need to host the databases ourselves. And what I initially did is I just set up a netcat listener and sent this to myself and saw that I did get a callback from the server. So that gave me a good hint. I actually need to set up a MySQL database. So I want to show you how to do that. When you first think, hey, I have to set up an entire MySQL database just to accomplish this machine, it seems to be intimidating at first, but you can actually harness the power of Docker and do all of this in one line. So I want to show you how to do this. We'll open up our terminal here, and I'm going to look over and make sure I get the right syntax, but let's go ahead and do this together. We'll do sudo docker run, and we'll just call the name LimeSurvey database, like so. We'll do -e. We're going to pass it the MySQL root password, and we're going to use the same password I use for my bank account and my YouTube account, hacksmarter123. We'll do -e MySQL database, and we can name the database LimeSurvey, and we'll pass it a MySQL user, and we'll call the MySQL user LimeSurvey user -e, whoops, lowercase e again, and we'll do a MySQL password for the user, and same very secure password of hacksmarter123. We want to expose it on port 3306, so we will do that like so. And then finally, we'll grab the latest version of the MySQL Docker container. As long as they don't have any typos, this should work. We will hit enter on our keyboard. You will see it's unable to find it, but it pulls it down. We have it running. And now if I do sudo docker PS to see running processes, you can see I successfully launched MySQL, and we now have an entire MySQL database set up in one line, which is amazing. Now let's jump back over to our LimeSurvey installer and configure some of these details. Our database location is going to be RIP followed by the port. So for me, it's 10.8.4.163. You can actually see when I did this before, followed by 3306. Of course, if you're following along, your IP is going to be different. Our database user is the LimeSurvey user, I believe is what we did. LimeSurvey user, yes. Our database password is, of course, hacksmarter123. Our database name is LimeSurvey database right there. So we'll grab that. LimeSurvey database, our table prefix looks good, making sure I got everything else correct. It all looks good to me. So let's go ahead and click next. All right, it says the database you specified does not exist. LimeSurvey can attempt to create this database for you. So it should exist. Let me see if I did something wrong, and I actually did do something wrong. I named the container LimeSurvey database. The name of the database is actually LimeSurvey. So if you made that same mistake, you'll want to fix that. Let's go previous, jump back over to here, and unfortunately, we'll fill all this out again real quick. It should autofill most of it out for us. LimeSurvey _ user, database password is hacksmarter123. I think I got that right. LimeSurvey user, yep, hacksmarter123. And now we have the correct database name there. Let's click next now. And it says perfect. The database name LimeSurvey already exists. That is a good sign. It means it was able to connect back to our machine. It found our database and it was able to enumerate, hey, there's already a database called LimeSurvey. And it says, do you want to populate that database now by creating the necessary tables? Absolutely, we want to populate the database, so we will click populate database. Now, I did notice if you are doing this part of the machine through a proxy, such as Burp Suite, Kaido, OWASP, Zap, this fails. I don't actually know why that causes it to fail, but I noticed that consistently. If I did this through a proxy, this process would eventually fail. So you'll want to do this process just in your straight Firefox or Chromium-based browser. Now, as it populates the database, this does take a few minutes. So grab a drink of water, hang out for a little bit, and your database should be done. In here, I will use the power of video editing, and we will jump forward. Actually, look at that. I was just explaining how it takes a while, but you can see it has been successfully populated. So it didn't take too long that time, but it all looks good. We need to fill out some of this information, so let's go ahead and do it. Our admin login is admin. Our password is going to be hacksmarter123, hacksmarter123. Administrator name is administrator. Our email can be tyler@hacksmarter.org. Don't actually email that. That's not my real email. It will go nowhere. Site name is fine, and let's go ahead and click next. And now here is the part that I believe can take a little bit to load, and nope, I am wrong. Eventually, we're going to get to a part that takes a little bit of time to load, but there you can see our LimeSurvey has been installed successfully. We have our administrator credentials and then hacksmarter123. Let's see if we can open up the administration panel. All right, and here we are. Just took a few seconds there. And let's go ahead and log in as admin and hacksmarter123, and we will click log in. This part does take, once again, just a minute or two, so I'll use the power of video editing, and we'll jump forward. Oh, and it looks like I actually did the wrong password. Let's try that again. Maybe it's administrator, hacksmarter123. Fingers crossed. Oh, did I like fat finger the password when we set it up? We'll give it another shot here. Come on. I believe in you, LimeSurvey. All right, I think I just typed the password wrong the first time. So when you actually, type the correct password like you're supposed to, it does take a few minutes for it to authenticate. So at first, I thought I did something wrong because it just hung like this for a while, but it's setting everything up as it's doing the initial login. So go ahead and take a short break. I will now use the power of video editing, and we will jump forward to when everything is successfully authenticated. All right, just took a few minutes, but our LimeSurvey instance is set up. We can go ahead and close out this first message right here. And it says, please enforce. Nope, that's for noobs. We don't need security. We're hackers. But we are logged into LimeSurvey, and let's do some research on that LimeSurvey RCE we saw. So we'll type LimeSurvey RCE, and we have a GitHub link right here. And it's basically, not basically, it is just a plugin. We're going to create two files, zip them up, and upload it as a plugin to get a PHP reverse shell. We can go ahead and grab this right here and git clone it to our machine. We will git clone like so, and we have the LimeSurvey RCE. It will CD into the LimeSurvey RCE like so, and we have the config.xml, the PHP rev.php, and of course the exploit.py. Now you can try to use this to automate the process, but I think it's better to see the manual process as we upload the plugin and see what it's actually doing. So if we cat out the config.xml, there's one change we need to make to this. You can notice the compatibility versions right here, 5.0, 4.0, and 3.0, we need to add our current version. So if we jump back over to our notes, that is 6.3.7. So let's make that change real quick. We'll just use mousepad, config.xml, and we will add that right here. We'll say version 6.3.7. I think that was the right version, right? 6.3.7, yes it was. And we can go ahead and Control S to save and close that out. The other change we'll want to make is if we cat out our PHP reverse shell file, we'll mousepad it. We need to update the IP, so it is our IP right in the two spots where it says change this. So let's do 10.8.4.163. Port 1337 works great. You're not a true hacker if you don't use port 1337, right? So we got that. We will save that file. Clear lsla. So we now have these two files that we saved, the config.xml and the php reverse.php, the php dash reverse.php, and now we need to zip them up so we can upload it as a plugin. Super easy to do that. We can do zip, and we'll call ours hacksmarter .zip, of course, and we want to zip up the config.xml, and we want to zip up the PHP file. There we go. If we lsla now, we now have the hacksmarter.zip file, and let's go ahead and upload that as a plugin. If we jump over to our LimeSurvey instance here, we can go to configuration, I think, plugins right there. Maybe. There we go. It's loading. Beautiful. And let's do upload and install our plugin. We'll browse and we'll go out and select our file, LimeSurvey RCE hacksmarter.zip, and we will install. We'll also go ahead and get our listener opened up on 1337, and that didn't find anything helpful. We're also basically done with that, but we have that. And it says the following plugin will be installed. Please click install to install the plugin or abort to abort. Let's go ahead and install it. Takes just a few seconds. It should install for us, and we'll have that plugin. While that plugin installs, let's look at the Python code, because in order to launch this, it's more than just installing it. You actually have to go to the PHP file on the system underneath the uploads directory. And the way you can know that is if we jump back over to this, we can do mousepad on our exploit.py, the one that's built into it. And if we scroll down, we just want to see what it ends up doing. And we can see after they upload the file, it goes directly to the file right here. Upload plugins, that author's name, and php-rev.php. So let's go ahead and grab that URL, and we can close that out. We can jump back over to LimeSurvey, and we will plug in the URL like so and hit enter. Now it hangs, which is always a good sign. If we jump back over to here, we now have our shell. Now, if we just do some very basic enumeration, lsla, you can see right away we are in a Docker environment. Now, anytime you're in a Docker environment, a good step to do is do env for environment. So let's go ahead and do that. And when we run env and look through this, what should stand out to you is we have a LimeSurvey password. So that might be helpful to us. Let's go ahead and grab that and let's add that to our notes. We now have our shell, and if I was taking good notes, I would have showed the upload process, but I didn't. So we'll say insert how you got a reverse shell here. If you're taking your own notes, make sure you do that. The reason I skipped it is I already did this live and have a whole section of notes on this machine, just showing you guys some of my note-taking process as we work our way through it. But let's pretend we have the information there and how we did that configuration file and got the reverse shell. And let's do an H1 right here, and we'll call it post-exploitation. And we will say we discovered creds by checking the environment. Nope, that's not the right thing. Environment, since it's a Docker container. And we can drop the creds right there. But that does not end our enumeration. We should see if we have any sudo right. So if we do sudo-l, you are going to see that it's going to fail because we do not have an interactive terminal. So let's go ahead and get an interactive terminal, and I will show you how we can do that. So the one issue we're going to have is generally to get an interactive shell, use Python 3 as the first step. But since we're in a Docker container, we're limited on what we have access to. So if we do like which Python 3, you can see we don't have Python 3. If we do which Python, we do not have Python either. Now we don't need a fully stable shell. We just want an interactive shell. So here's how you can get an interactive shell without having access to Python within a Docker container. We can do script qc bin bash dev null, and that will at least give us a somewhat interactive shell. We can't clear, but we can do sudo-l. And now when we do that, we're prompted for the password, and let's grab the password that, let's jump back over to here, grab the password that we got from right here. So we'll grab this password, Control-C, jump over to this, paste it in, and you can see on the Docker container at least, we have full root privileges. So we can do sudo su, and we are now the root user. But we haven't compromised the machine. We have only compromised the Docker container. If we cd over to root, we don't have any information here. If we cd over to home, ls cd lime service lsla, we also don't have much information there. So we're within a Docker container, not fully in the host VM itself. If you're new to Docker, it's almost like a virtual machine. It's virtualization technology, and that's actually how we made our MySQL databases within a Docker container. So let's see if we can target the host system. If we go back to our notes, remember one of the things we checked right in the beginning was whether or not password authentication was enabled for SSH. Anytime you see that it's enabled, then when you find credentials for any user, you want to try credential reuse in order to get access to SSH. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. We'll jump back over to our terminal here. We'll name this SSH, and let's try that. We'll SSH as LimeSurvey, I think is the name, forgotten/.vl. And it prompts for our password, and we'll see if this password works for SSH access. And it does. Beautiful. So if we LSLA, we now have access to the host itself, and you can cat out user.txt, but I'm not going to show you the flag. I've showed you every step to get to the flag. I encourage you to go through this. Even if you are fully stuck and you're following along with me, that's totally fine, but do the work on your own. Log in, do the exploitation, and grab user.txt yourself. But from here, we need to do some enumeration and see if we have access to anything. There's some basic things we can try, like sudo-l. Do we have any sudo privileges? Put in our password, and we do not. We can check ID to see what groups we are in. Another thing you do is run limpes. Limpes is a Linux script that will look for any privilege escalation paths, but I will save the time of doing that. But if you want to see me do all of that live and in real time, as I was figuring this out myself, once again, watch those live streams for January 6th and January 8th, and you can see me do all of that live. But once we ran linps, I was still a little bit stuck, trying to understand what exactly do I need to do. But I've seen this before. On another machine, I had a very similar scenario where I had root within a container and user on the host machine. But with that, depending on how Docker is configured, we might be able to actually elevate our privileges if there is a shared drive that is mounted. And I want to show you, there's a few different ways we could of course discover that, but I want to show you a little tool made for Docker enumeration that I ended up using. And that tool is called DeepCE. So let me show you this tool. This is actually the first time I've used it before. I've seen it like when I'm looking at Docker escapes, but never actually tried it out. But if you type in DeepCE, we can go to the Docker page, or not the Docker page, rather the GitHub page, and it's just a bash script right here, deepce.sh, and you can go ahead and grab this. We'll grab this, jump back to our machine right here, and we'll call this our web server. And let's git clone that link. If we go into it, we have the deepce.sh, and let's set up a basic Python web server so we can transfer this file to the Docker container and do some Docker enumeration. We'll do Python 3 HDM server 8000 like so, jump over to the Docker container, and we'll just call this Docker. And if we do which wget, we don't have wget. If we do which curl, we do have curl. And with curl, we can download the file from our attack machine to the Docker container and then execute it. We can do curl, want to type in RIP 10.8.4.163 on port 8000, deepce.sh-o for output file, and we'll call it deepce.sh. When we do that, we can do ls, we have it there, we'll make it executable, like so, and then let's go ahead and run this, and it's going to look for any common Docker misconfigurations that might allow us to escape. If I scroll up, you can see it's very similar to linps or winps. We have color-coded tests, so if it's red like this, it says, hey, this is exploitable, you might want to check this out. We have a positive result, an error, a negative test, and a multi-line test. So number one, we enumerate our platform. We can see that yes, we are inside a container. We are inside Docker. We don't have any container tools or it errors out. We have the root user, which gives us a little more power, things we might be able to exploit. As we continue to scroll and we enumerate the container, we cannot get the container through reverse DNS because of course the machine doesn't have an IP connection. We do have the container IP. We have the host IP and the container IP within the host, the internal DNS server. We have the Linux kernel version information. Scrolling. We don't have any dangerous capabilities. I mean, we have, it says this is required but not installed, so we can kind of ignore that. But here is something that should stand out to us. we have something mounted. Specifically, within the Docker container, var www HTML survey is mounted to opt LimeSurvey on the host machine. So let's go ahead and grab this for our notes. We'll do this, jump over to our notes, and we have this mounted file system. Look into this, right? So we'll do that, and let's check this out ourselves. We'll jump over to our terminal, and let's go to the host machine and go to opt. ls/la, and sure enough, we have a LimeSurvey here in opt. And now on our Docker container, it says it is right here, var www HTML survey. So let's go there. And if you look at this page and you look at this page, they have the same files. But here's the crazy thing. We're root in the container, so we can write commands to the host container as, well, the root user. I'll show this to you. We can do touch hacksmarter.txt. Once again, this is from within our Docker container. Let's go to the host machine right here, ls/la, and when we do this, we have hacksmarter.txt, and it is by the root user. Now, there's a few different ways you can use this for privilege escalation. I will show you kind of the easiest thing that we can do. We are going to copy the bin bash binary to here. We're going to add the suid bit to it, make it the root user the owner of it, and then we're going to execute it. So we're going to flip back and forth between the host machine and our Docker container in order to get a full root shell. So step number one, let's copy bin/bash, and we can even do which bash. So we have that. So let's do cp user bin bash, and we'll copy it to this directory. If we do ls, you can see that we have bash right there. Now let's jump back over to our Docker container, ls/la, and we have bash right there, but it's owned by the LimeSurvey user. Well, let's go ahead and change the ownership to the root user on bash. All right, and now let's see if that is reflected on the host container. ls/la, you can now see that root is the owner of the bash binary, and from there we can add this so it can execute as the root user to the bash binary. And now let's jump back over to this, and we're going to run bash with -p, so we abuse that suid binary that we set. And if we do who am I, you can see we are now the root user. We can cd over to root, ls/la, and cat out root.txt and get the final flag. But once again, I'm not going to show you the final flag on stream. I showed you every step to get to that point. But if you get to this point, you can go ahead and grab that flag yourself. But let's talk about why this works, because to be honest with you, although I've seen this before on another CTF, it's a little bit difficult for me to wrap my mind around this. So let's see if we can go through this slowly. First, we have the two machines. We have our host machine where we only have user access, and we'll exit back out to that. The host machine where we only have user access, and the Docker container where we have root access. So this is the reason it works. I said before, in the container, we have root privileges. On the host machine, we just have user privileges, but we have a shared mounted drive. So we have a connection between the Docker container and the host machine, which ultimately is not good. The purpose of Docker is virtualization. The purpose of Docker is to isolate that from the host machine. So that was a mistake that the sysadmin of this machine made. Of course, fictional. It's a intentionally vulnerable machine. On the host machine, since we have access as a user to that shared directory, we're able to run binaries, anything we want there as the low-level user. But over in Docker, since we have root, we can set a suid binary, or a set UID rather is the correct terminology, to the bash binary, which allows it to run with root privileges. So that's kind of what we covered. If you want to learn more about that, there's a few things you can do. One is do the machine yourself and do some digging into how all of this is set. But the term that you want to look into, and I'll just type it right here, is the set UID permission. That's what we're doing. When we ran the command change mod u plus s on the bash binary, that is what we are doing. But before we can do that, we want to set it so it's owned by root. And that's what I did the first time. If we go back over to our syntax here, although I don't know if I saved it. Actually, yeah, I did. It is right here. When we change it to the root owner, that is important before running that, and we can even grab that. That is important before running it, because what this is going to allow it to do is we're going to say any user can run this binary as the owner of the binary. Remember, the first time it was just owned by LimeSurvey, so running this alone wouldn't do anything because you would just be able to run bash as LimeSurvey, which you can already do. So we copied the bash binary to the shared mount. We set the root user as the owner of the binary, and then the set UID bit means, hey, when the bash binary is ran with the -p flag that I showed you, it will run with the permissions of the owner of the binary, not as the user running the binary, therefore leading to privilege escalation. But this was a really cool machine. I want to give a huge shout out to Vulnlab once again for having such an incredible platform. If you haven't checked out Vulnlab, you need to. The machines are a little bit more difficult than some of the other platforms you might be on, but they're also way more realistic. From my experience, there's no silly CTFs, there's no crazy steganography, there's no puzzles. Everything you encounter on the machines are things you will encounter in the real world. They also have AD chains and red team networks with full EDR enabled, so you can practice really advanced red team techniques throughout Vulnlab. But hey, thank you for watching this video. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Believe it or not, I try to do my best to read all the comments on my video. So if you have a question, let me know in the comment. I'll do my best to respond to you. Otherwise, hey, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.